Good evening and welcome to Heat and Spurs. Post-game, the San Antonio Spurs got it done 110 to 95 at home. I'd like to take this time to point out that this podcast will be retransmitted and republished tomorrow morning. So all of you listening Friday morning, good morning. Last night, I'm sure all of you saw the game. It was it was a really good game down the stretch. LeBron had some issues with the air conditioning in the building. LeBron was cramping. A lot of other players were definitely showing severe signs of fatigue. That really, I don't think, played too much of a factor in the outcome of the game. The Spurs just started shooting. Danny Green, who was scoreless throughout the entire game up until the fourth quarter, he came out, he had 8 straight points for the Spurs. He wound up with 13 points. He was the one that started the whole trend. They just started hitting threes. Tony Parker hit a couple. He wound up with 19 points. Tim Duncan had a great game, 21 points and 10 rebounds. And as I talked in the pregame show, the big man, Chris Bosh or Tim Duncan, whichever one does better, that's the team that's going to win. And Chris Bosh, 18 points, 9 rebounds. Tim Duncan just outscored him and out-rebounded him. Tim Duncan just had the better game. Tiago Splitter had 14 points. Manu Ginobili had a big 16 off the bench. He looked extremely great early on in the game. He kept him in the game. Just talked about him. Marco Bellinelli had 9 points. Marco Bellinelli, I think he was kind of a sleeper in this game. He came out a little bit early, and he knocked down a couple of shots. Those were pretty big shots for the Spurs. Now, Dayal didn't really do what he normally does, but he did bring in the rebounds. He had 10 rebounds. Those were really big. He just could not get the offense to flow tonight. He had to guard LeBron for most of the game. He kind of struggled with that. When Leonard was out, it was Dayal on James. That was not a good matchup for the Spurs. And in return, Dayal just couldn't get anything. He couldn't put the ball on the ground. He was making bad passes, and the whole entire Spurs team was making some pretty bad passes. 22 turnovers, not acceptable. Not acceptable at all. There's been games this year where the Spurs have gone with less than 10 turnovers. Down to, I think, 4 turnovers in one game. 22 turnovers, that's what has killed this team. That's what killed this team today. Now, the Heat, it looked like they brought their A game. It looked like they were playing as best as they could, and they were still beating a Spurs team that had 22 turnovers. The Heat were able to put up 6 less turnovers. That's 6 more possessions that the Heat had to capitalize on, and they couldn't get it done. The Heat shot 37 for 78. They shot 47% from the field tonight. The Spurs shot 58% from the field and 52% from 3. That's just a great shooting night for the Spurs. When they had the ball, when they had it in their possession, and they were running the ball up and down the court, playing in their rhythm, they were making shots consistently, and they got it done offensively. And that's what they have to do. For the Miami Heat, we're going to look at how they played. LeBron James, 25 points in 32 minutes. That was just about it for the Heat. Dwayne Wade had 19. Chris Bosh had 18 points. Ray Allen off the bench had 16 points. There were times in this game where Ray Allen looked like a superstar. He looked like what he looked like in Boston. He looked like the Boston Ray Allen. He took a fast break dunk. He took it coast to coast. He was hitting shots. He was driving. He was penetrating. He was passing. He was playing incredible defense. Ray Allen had a great game, but it wasn't enough. I like the way that Ray Allen played tonight. I like the way that the Heat played tonight. I wouldn't be too worried. I think, the whole LeBron situation, if he would have stayed in the game, if the air conditioning was working, how could that have changed the game? The score that is at the end, the 110-95, that 15, that's not truly how the game was. The game was about a 5-point game. At the end, there was a couple extra shots that went down, and it added to the lead. But in the game in its entirety, it was a 5-point game, and the Heat could have easily been there. They thought they lost LeBron. It was done. Could have fought back, could have stayed in the game. Didn't happen. Tony Parker nailed a 3, and then Leonard came down, nailed a 3, and it was over. So, as things progressed, we kind of saw in the pregame what I talked about. Tim Duncan had a great night. Danny Green was able to show up eventually. He had 13 points. He shot 3 for 7 from 3. Definitely not what the Spurs were looking for. Tony Parker was just fine. He came out, he played extremely well. He had 36 minutes. He led the team in minutes. He had a great game all around. No apparent problems. He looked to be playing just fine. So that really helped the Spurs, and it was just it was the matchup. Like I said earlier, you had Tim Duncan. They were able to play big in the post, and it was just those little passes in the post to the bigger guys, and they were able just to dump in the layup, slam down the dunk, and they were easy points. Tonight, the Spurs were getting easy points, and that is why they won. So, I thank you for listening. Have a wonderful evening, and if you're listening to this in the morning, have a wonderful Friday.